Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are now live streaming.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Performance, Finance and Scrutiny Committee meeting, today being the 25th of November. And I must say we have a very extremely full agenda here. So we will try and keep it within this meeting. We hope we can. I'm sure there'll be a lot of points raised and a lot of points discussed. So let me move on. Apologies for absence, Officer.
We've had apologies from Councillor Sean Garrett, and Councillor Valerie White is substituting for him.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. Minutes of the previous meeting. I hope everyone has read it. Any points on that to be raised? Okay, as chair, I got a couple of points. I raised it earlier, and for the benefit of everyone here, like the last meeting, we had raised that PNF to be included is this documents which are under review, to be reviewed by the monitoring officer and to be released. That should be noted. And also the finance officer was requested to produce the quarterly income statement with MRPs for each investment. So if you can add that in, and I'm happy with the rest of it. Thank you. Anyone proposing it? Second. I can't see anyone. Let me do Cliff Bess, and thank you, Councillor Beth. Thank you, Sir Councillor Crook as well. Okay, I shall sign it whenever I'm in the building next. Right, off we go. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest on the items to be discussed today? I cannot see any hands on my screen. I'm sure Kate will let me know if I can't see any. Okay, I presume none. So onwards and upwards. The very first item, a big department, portfolio holder update, business and transformation. Councillor Dugan, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, it is a big portfolio, and given the fact that you've already said you have a packed agenda for this evening, I don't propose to take you through the paper. I'm hoping that you have all read it, and I will beg questions from you.
Give everybody a sort of, I can only see 25 on my screen. So if I don't see anybody else, Kate will inform me. I'll start with Councillor White. Thereafter, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report, Councillor Duggan. I read through it this afternoon when I found out I was subbing for the meeting tonight. It's very interesting and very informative. Could I take you to paragraph 8.10? And could you tell us more about the Grant Thornton report on resilience? Do you have anything to say on that?
I do. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic piece of news, I guess, for the Borough Council. So this is a report that was actually requested by the Society of District Council Treasurers, although its appearance in the Municipal Journal, I believe, was a leak. But Grant Thornton are the 6th biggest accountancy company in the world. They operate out of 135 countries. They've been doing it for over 100 years. And what they were asked to do was look at across England who was most likely to be who was going to recover well, really, at the post-COVID, and to a degree why. So they came up with two indexes, and we did really quite extraordinarily well. So the first one, which was recoverability, you wanted to come towards the top of the. You get that bill working for you, Vivian. So you want to come at the top and or towards the top, and we came number one. And recoverability really is just looking at whether or not we're financially well placed to recover. And the second table was what they called economic vulnerability, and in that you want to come towards the bottom. Disappointingly, we didn't come bottom. We only managed to scrape in at second bottom. But if you put those two things together, it does make us clearly one of the, in their view, one of the most likely districts to come out of this well. Not to be taken with any form of complacency. This is going to be tough. You only need to look at universal credit numbers, loss of jobs elsewhere in that same piece around economic development. But it's nice to know that we may have less of an uphill struggle than others.
Thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind that, and this is just a general question about not a specific item in the report, but about economic development within the borough itself. Bearing in mind the importance these days of a good broadband connection to the delivery of good business in general, and being aware of the relatively patchy delivery of service, particularly by Virgin Media and also by Openreach, and being aware that there is a new kid on the block now. Sorry, my cat's decided to take part in the movement tonight. That there's a new kid in the block called Tube, who operate out of Southampton, promising to deliver 900 plus megabits per second broadband. What are we doing to encourage Virgin Media and Openreach to up their game, and also to encourage Tube to expand their network into Camberley and Frimley sooner rather than later? I learned today, in fact, that Tube have submitted a planning application for a network hub building to be constructed on the site of Camberley Cricket Club. Is there anything we can do to encourage that planning application to receive a good attention so that we can get this on the move sooner rather than later?
Right, an interesting question, thank you. So firstly, I need to declare a declaration of interest. I am employed by BT, who own Openreach. Interestingly, there is complete separation between Openreach and the rest of BT where I work. And therefore, whilst I'm employed by them, I don't believe that I have a declarable pecuniary interest, but I'm happy to take guidance on that. I don't think the monitoring officer's on, but Mr. Payne, former monitoring officer.
Yes, I mean, obviously we're not here to make decisions, but obviously be mindful of anything you say in respect of BT Openreach. I would perhaps, if it's okay with Councillor Tappas, direct your answer in respect. He said, I think Virgin Media as well. Perhaps focus on Virgin Media and leave BT Openreach to one side.
Thank you. The answer is largely the same for all of them anyway. The responsibility for broadband across the county is largely taken up by county, and it's the county councils that encourage and indeed fund, where necessary, an extension of the coverage from the commercial companies. And in essence, they are commercial companies. These people will put broadband in where they're going to get a return. Largely, they get a return, interestingly enough, from residential rather than from business, as we found out when we tried to get the broadband increased into Surrey Heath House, and off the box where we wanted the service improved, there were about, I can't remember, let's say 15 businesses and no residents. And guess what? It took an awfully long time to happen. In terms of your comment about Tube, who I've not heard of, nor indeed was I aware of the planning application, but I'm delighted to say that I did specifically have added into our updated local plan. It's still not the local plan yet, but an almost reversal in the attitude towards technology. Given what we've just said about the Grant Thornton report and our ability to recover, in part it's because we are a very, or we have a large IT type sector within the borough, and it's one of those sectors which makes us recoverable. And yet our planning policy said, in effect, we don't want anything here, keep your technology elsewhere, we want to be a lovely green and leafy borough. And now actually the local plan will state that we will encourage technology companies. So I hope that when this planning application comes forward, that will be given the eensy-weensy bit of weight that it can be, given that it's not our local plan yet, but nonetheless it has gone through our initial consultations and should at least, well, it will at least get mentioned from me, Councillor Tapper, assuming I am at that meeting. So, and I would imagine it would come to the Planning Applications Committee.
It may do, depending upon whether the planning officer considers that there's nothing that needs to be directed to the committee.
So Mrs. Rickard was nodding, so I'm sure that she will ensure that's taken into account.
I will find out what's involved. I'm not familiar with the planning application. I'll have a chat with the case officer.
Okay.
Good. Thank you for that.
Anyone else?
Any other questions? Okay. Victor, Councillor Wheeler. Then thereafter, Councillor Wren.
Thank you. I just was reassured to see that there seems to be an awful lot of work underway within the report and a lot of things that seem to be happening. I just wondered when we might receive an update as to when that work has actually started in a progress report. So in particular, the reviewing of the local departmental records, the attribution of where job losses are and the actions associated with those. The other thing on a sort of another point is I am really hoping, Councillor Dugan, that green and lovely and technology can go hand in hand. I hope that we don't have to give up one to have the other. Otherwise, I will also be talking about it a great deal. The other thing is a very small thing, and it's a minute of detail, and that is TICSPAC, the dog waste scheme. Certainly in all the areas that I've been walking recently, we've got lots of empty bin stores with no bags attached to them. So I wonder if we could have an update on that, and if we can't get businesses to sponsor the provision of the dog waste bags, what plans we've got to remove these redundant posts from around the borough. Thank you.
I missed the very first part before you said job losses.
Yeah, it was relating to point 8.5, where it says that investigations are underway to attribute the loss of jobs because the figure is significant. And I just wondered when that's likely to be completed and the output of it. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I mean the loss of jobs is dramatic, quite clearly. Even with the updated number, given that the first publication said 11,000, we actually had to get in touch with the ONS and question their data, and they came back with these revised figures, which you now have in front of you. We have largely done that, and we can actually tie back a bunch of these lost jobs. They're lost on the whole, actually, they're lost jobs to Surrey, Heath, and a lot of them have relocated. So, for instance, you'll be aware that Eli Lilly have moved out the borough, and there are others like that. And we actually sort of assessed that there's around 20 businesses which would probably get us quite close to that. But that said, if you then cross-reference the loss of jobs with the increase in universal benefit claimants, which is astonishing, really. We've always been, I guess, quite pleased that, you know, the number is relatively low. Obviously, you don't want anyone to be needing to claim benefits, but nonetheless, it's a fact of life. But it's up by 300%. That increase is 48% of those people are self-employed. So these are businesses that just have not been able to operate in the pandemic, and they have had to resort to claiming universal credit. So we've done a piece of work, you know, around that already. I think if you want more, I can get you more. I don't think there's a forum for us to come forward necessarily with that, but I'm sure we can find it. I agree with you entirely on Green and Lovely. I'm sure it will all sit happily side by side, Councillor Wheeler. And the Tip Tac thing, I wasn't aware that they were empty. I would rather not remove the posts. I'd rather have the posts replenished with dog poo bags. They're empty clearly because people want to take them and remove the dog poo from wherever it is they're walking their dogs. But I will take it's probably not, that piece probably doesn't, well, I might sit with Mr. Harrison actually, but not really part of my portfolio. But nonetheless, I would rather that we kept on to what's been put there, because that's where the majority of the cost is, I'm guessing, and putting some dog poo bags up there would be relatively cheap. But we will get onto it for you.
Thank you. Councillor Wren.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler kind of beat me to the point now, which is I'm going to ask about that. When I was looking at that looked absolutely insane. 11,000 people, jobs lost. I did some quick math on it as I was looking at it, and that's 16.9%, which is, you know, normally that you'd be looking at that and you'd be thinking there must be some sort of economic crash that's happened in Surrey Heath. Which, you know, it hasn't been the case, but it's certainly concerning. And you're quite right. I think the whole 300% universal credit applications, I believe that's from June to end of August. So that's not even taken into what we've got now. And then not including what was just being reported, which I'm sure other councillors have watched today, the autumn report from the Chancellor of Exchequer, where they're looking at about 7.5% unemployment next year, up to about 2.6 million people unemployed, which is the highest it's been in possibly decades, if not centuries. So it's quite concerning. And you just mentioned about how it's 48% is self-employed. And I'm just thinking, you know, what can we do to be benefiting or helping these self-employed people? You know, I'm thinking about working at home provisions and the way that we think about economic schemes to help them out, whether that means that we can increase, you know, doing things like the scheme we have where we've got a gift card for spending in the Camberley Town shopping centre, and thinking about whatever there's schemes that we can give them to spend within our shopping centre, to have expenditure here that we can see through business rates. But we'll give them through some universal credit scheme. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud at this point in time, but it just seems like we are kind of waiting for mass unemployment to increase next year, especially as furlough comes off. And that number of 11,000 isn't concerning on normal times, because you would think, well, that's just from 2019, 2020. But when you look at that and you're thinking about where we're heading, that might be more troubling than I think any of us should be expecting. So I'm glad we're having that report done, and I'm looking forward to hearing from it. But maybe some thoughts on what we can do to help those, especially the self-employed. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Before Councillor Dugan, before you answer, I want to make a point to the officers. I mean, I also saw the 11,000. When I had the briefing, I was absolutely shocked. Now we got a revised figure of 4,000. It's absolutely paramount that the councillors are given figures which have been checked at least 2 or 3 times and questioned, because it just creates unnecessary going around circles. I hope you don't mind me requesting that, officers. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Duggan.
Yeah. So when we got that number, I mean, it was, I guess I would have had this similar reaction to you, Christian. It was quite staggering. And to be fair, the team did take that number in. As I say, they actually rang the ONS and just said, hold on a minute, this doesn't seem right. And they sort of came back cap in hand and said, we're sorry. So I will pass on your comments, Councillor Mulvaginam, to the ONS and ask them to sort their life out on your behalf. But that, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing that that figure came through, but, and 4,000 is still not a great number, let's be clear. What can we do? So we actually, let me see if I can find it. There are some bits in the report. So 813 is 813 in the report outlines a couple of initiatives that we've taken through the executive and provided funding for. And they're actually, 2 of them are directly related to either startup or small one-man self-employed type businesses. So there's the business that the Startup Academy itself, and then the Pop-Up Business School is actually a 2-week course, and we're doing that, I think, with Guildford Borough Council, if my memory serves me right, jointly funding it. It's an online course, and we will market that and try and give people the skills, whether they're have a business which is currently in effect dormant, or whether it's new people that are now out of work and think that they might like to try and set up their own business. It will be open to them. So we are doing what we can. I hear what you're saying around providing cards and stuff. At the end of the day, that is what universal credit is for. It is not our responsibility. We're not funded to do it, and it's not an avenue that I would want to go down.
Any other questions?
You have Councillor Tapper and Councillor Allaway.
Thank you. Councillor Tapper first, Councillor Allaway, thereafter Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Item 8.6, specifically, and it's already been mentioned, the Eli Lilly site. Bearing in mind that office blocks seem to be dying, and we definitely have a need for residential accommodation. Are we specifically looking to sell this site to a developer who will redevelop this, what is essentially a brownfield site, for residential accommodation? I looked at the site on the map the other day, and it looks as though it could accommodate a substantial number of homes, which will make a big difference in our 5-year delivery plan.
Okay. When I wear my planning applications hat, Councillor Tapper, I'd normally agree with you here. But what I'll do is I'll take you another part of 8.5 in a long-winded way of answering your question. So if we look at the one above, Still, you will remember the Still application coming through and what we had to do to keep Still in the borough. This borough, very simply, does not have enough what's called economic development land. We don't have enough space to put the facilities that are required to employ people. And the more land, which again has been given permitted development rights, turning offices into accommodation just depletes an already poor stock. We were in long conversations with Eli Lilly as they were talking to us about the fact they were looking for somewhere else to go. And we showed them everything that we had. We showed them everything we thought that we could potentially help them get to, and nothing was big enough in Surrey Heath, and hence they've exited. I am delighted to say that Eli Lilly have sold their site. They've sold their site to a not dissimilar business that will bring 650 new jobs to the borough. It won't happen immediately because they plan to refurbish the Eli Lilly facility. I think they're in a very similar line of work, so it's not a knock down and start again. I don't think it's a refurbishment. So no, it's not going to be housing, for which we go, yay, good, because we're going to have the opportunity to bring high value jobs back to the borough.
Councillor Allaway, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I should declare an interest, I think, probably on this point, 2.3, because I work in this industry of quality management, certification and consultancy. But my question was regarding the 9001 application. Will that be just for business and transformation, or is it intended to be across the council? Secondly, is it proposed to just work to, or to get actual certification to 9001? And which kind of leads me on to 7.6 in a way, because in 9001 there's a generic process which covers control of documents, which would be good to have the same level of control right across the council for documents as opposed to individual sections. In fact, if you applied 9001 across the council, you'd have a consistent level of performance as opposed to just individual sections. And my third point was on 8.1, the summary of the current state of the borough. I wonder if that could be extended to give us a bit of a 5-year view as opposed to 2, just to get a bit of a better view of the trajectory of things. Thank you.
Okay, so 2.3, and I'm happy that if anybody wants to step in on building control, Mrs. Rickard, but we are working towards, no, we're looking to get certified, because that's what will be required under the new fire safety regulations. We think it's not, I don't think it's clear yet, but these are new regulations that are coming out as a result of the Grenfell Tower fire, and one of the findings is that the building control department of, I think it was Kensington and Chelsea Borough Council, was woefully understaffed, and really probably wasn't able to carry out what was required and prevent that tragedy. And the new regulation will be that planning or enforcement teams will be properly staffed so that this doesn't happen. Mrs. Rickard, on that point.
Yeah, ISO 9001, all of the building control teams across Surrey are currently seeking to achieve that standard. They will have to be certificated for the purposes of carrying on as building control teams. So that, and it's all to do with building fire risk safety on the higher buildings. We have to do it, or we actually won't be allowed to do the work on those buildings in future. So that it's a very, very profession specific requirement to do with chartered building control officers, and we are trying to make sure that the Borough Council meets all of the standards required of building control teams, and so that's why the team are going for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Rickard. I just want to add, I think just to help out the Councillor Allaway here, what he's trying to drive here is to take ISO 9001 and extend it to the entire council. So we as a council become compliant with a certification of ISO 9001. I think, am I right in saying that, Councillor Allaway? And I would support you with that.
Yeah, it's just to avoid having functions in the council operating on a potentially higher level than some of the others. It makes sense to, for instance, control of documents. That's a generic process that should be applied right across the council, control of documents. Whether you get certified is another issue, because with the size of the council, yeah, they do it on turnover and they do it on number of employees. That's where they set the fees. So it would be expensive, but you can still just get certified for particular functions, and then the rest of the council can work to the same principles and get the same benefits of an enhanced quality management system, which, you know, you can just bolt on the extra bits that dovetail into 9001, such as 27,001 for data security. Environmental is 14,001. they're all fairly aligned standards now. But anyway, I won't try and push it because it looks like I'm trying to sell you something. But just to say, you know, I mean, if you wish to ask me about it, and no problem, I'll definitely contribute into those areas for you.
Sure, it will be free of charge, yeah, Councillor Alloway. Having said that, let me move on. Have you finished answering Councillor Alloway's Councillor Dugan, or shall I move on?
I guess
now?
to go back on 7.6, there certainly isn't a project underway to turn the council into ISO 9001. I can ask the question. I would equally, in all honesty, have thought that we would have considered it at some point and decided not to. But let me find that out and come back to you. We'll come back to you separately. Mrs. Livingston, if you could pick that up as to make sure that I get that answer back to Councillor Alloway. And the 5-year view we can do as well. We just need to ask the economic development team to do that. I'm sure the stats will have been produced that far back. It's just a case of digging them out and putting them into a table.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. It was really, Councillor Dugan, just a point regarding the help for small businesses, and in particular 8.18, where there's obviously the government grants that have come from central government. There's 3 tiers of those grants at the moment in Surrey Heath. Businesses locally have been advised of 1 and 2, and as yet, small businesses locally haven't been told about grant number 3. There's emails going around saying that the news will be coming soon, but obviously where we're coming out of lockdown next week, this is meant to be helping them for the past month. So I was just wondering when that news will hit small businesses.
I can't see exactly where you're referring to in the document, but I don't think it matters. So I think the council did a phenomenal job with the business grants in the first lockdown. A mixture of economic development, but also I see that Mr. Fox is on the phone and his team. The way that they turned around the requests for business grants was quite simply splendid. I can only imagine that if anyone was to rank that, we'd be at the top of that table too. And actually, in the terms of the approach, if what we're talking about now is that the government's announced a new fund in effect for lockdown 2, which we're in fact, we're a week away from being out of, but that fund's got to last through, if my memory serves me right, until March next year. In fact, it might even be longer than that. And the fund, it's not an insignificant fund. My understanding is, and everything's still got to be finalised by government, which part answers your question, but I understand it's £20 per resident head, which gets us to about £1.7 million that we'll have to disperse. Now, what the economic development team did, and Councillor Mulvaginam and I signed off very recently, once this became, we knew it was going to be a thing, we have pushed out, in effect, a stage 1 scheme, which the council is already advertising to small businesses, which gives you the opportunity, or small businesses the opportunity, to lay their hands on a relatively small sum of money, but it might be enough to pay the rent bill or whatever it is that needs to be done until government comes out. They come out apparently with this, in effect, a bunch of FAQs, which they hope will explain what it is that and how they want councils to administer the wider fund. So we're actually going to create 2 tranches here, and that you could say, well, that's what that's just additional burden. I viewed it, as did Sashi viewed it. This was an opportunity to get cash in the hands of the businesses, which is where that money is intended, sooner rather than later, and and immediately, and then we'll get the larger scheme in place when we know what all the rules and regs for that scheme will be. So again, when that was Mrs. Hodgeberg, and on her initiative, I think we're the only council in Surrey that's doing it, and I take my hat off to her. I thought it was a superb idea. Well done, us.
Right. Any other questions? If not, the chair has a couple of questions. Sorry, Mr. Councillor Mansfield, did you put your hand up? And just to run things up, I thought I'll wait till the last to make sure that nobody's asked the following questions. And I'll try and keep it short for you, Councillor Dugan. In terms of my questions, answer could be long, but that's entirely up to you. We are looking at the Camberley Theatre. Camberley Theatre, as we know, has been making losses over the past few years. Personally, I think I'm all for keeping the Camberley Theatre. That's a personal view. As a councillor, definitely, I want to keep the theatre going. Do we have any idea what the losses would be for 2021, the year we are in? The second question is on same income generation part of things, on the car parking income. I know car parking has had a very tough time in the town centre because of these on and off lockdowns we've been having. I don't know how much that is going to impact on the income, because when it comes to when we come to looking at the whole of the financial half year finance, maybe we can pick part of it up, but it'll be nice to hear your views on it right now. And the Heat Scene magazine, which costs 21 pence a copy, what kind of response are we getting? Has any survey done to see whether this is value for money in terms of communicating with the residents? And that's 3 questions. And finally, let you answer those 3 first. They've got a couple, they are minor ones, they can wait.
Okay, so on the theatre, the loss of income is outlined at 3.4. It's phenomenal. It's exactly the same time periods, if you note from the 2 bullet points. So it's an absolute year-on-year, day-to-day comparison. And this year's income and footfall is 2% of what we did last year. It is down by 98%. If it is an upside as such, the only upside is that the theatre income also is lost income that we can apply to the government scheme and get the 71.25% of lost income back. So, you know, we are clearly going to have let me work this out, of a 26.75% loss of income on the theatre. Given that we've made 2%, we'll get 71.25, or we should do. I'm happy for Mr. Hone to tell me that. He's nodding well there, so I think that's the case. But yeah, we're gonna take a hit. It is worth pointing out, I don't know whether it's in the report, can't remember, but we do subsidise the theatre, and we have forever. What I would say under the management of Mr. Edmeads and Mr. Harrison, we have significantly reduced the amount of income that amount of subsidy that we have to provide. So last year, I think it was somewhere between 200 and 250,000. Still a lot, but an awful lot better than where it was. You know, we are putting on shows which are much more, well, and they must be much more attractive because they're largely a full house. I drive past the theatre on a daily basis when I come back from my dog walks, and that used to always make me smile when you'd see the advert, but it would say sold out, which wasn't a thing 16 years ago when I started this role. So sorry, that's that one. Car parking. So the same's true for car parking. We haven't made a big thing about the fact, and interestingly enough, we've also not had any complaints, but you remember in lockdown 1, we made car parking free across the borough. And I think lockdown 2 is different to lockdown 1. But we did that in part because there were going to be loads of people who weren't going anywhere, who needed somewhere to put their car. And bless the government, they've given us 71.25% of our lost income from that car park, the time that the car park was not delivering us revenue. They changed the rules for lockdown 2, and if you took actions that would stop you earning the income, i.e. you provided free parking, then you wouldn't get the 71.25% rebate. Hence, we left car parking where it is. The car parking service, between lockdown, had returned to nearly 80% of the figures that we would have seen the previous year. So the return of people to the town centre was getting 80%. Is clearly 20% off, but it's much better than it was. So I would hope that the car parking service will bounce back once lockdown 2 is finished, and obviously the drive for Christmas and all the rest of it as well. So it is. There's more news to come on that, but not for this evening. But yes, clearly there's a significant damage to income, and Mr. Hone will have the glorious task of coming up with a nice balanced budget on the back of losing the income that we've lost. Has there been a survey? No, I think we think that the feedback on Heathseen is pretty positive. I think the publication itself has improved over that. It's got shorter and improved. I think it has a good sort of editorial voice as such. It's a good place for, if for nothing else, it's a good place for the council to get its messaging out on things like, what we want you to recycle and what we don't, when your bins are going to get collected, etc., etc. But we haven't surveyed the residents to see what they think of it. On my very small survey of one of the mums that comes to our house, I accused of not knowing anything about what the council did. She came in directly after she'd received the last copy of Heathseen to tell me all what was in Heathseen. So that's 100% response on that survey, Sashi. More questions.
I would suggest that we do a small sample survey to see where we are with it, because it costs some money and it's a good idea to have a Heathseen. I'm not against it. I just want to look at the value for money. Right, Councillor Wren.
I was just going to chime in there. Surely through Kate and running our social media services, which is drastically improved, I just want to give her a shout out for that. But also, presumably we could run a poll on our Facebook page of how many people read it, or something along those lines.
Good idea. Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, it's just to say
the
the people that are most likely to benefit from it are the ones that are unlikely to respond to a poll. So the whole reason for Heathseen really going out physically is that it reaches those people that aren't on social media. So I'm not sure of the value of doing a poll on social media for something that we put out largely to reach those residents that aren't using social media.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman, very much along the same lines. We've done this in the past, we've looked at it. Not everybody, funnily enough, surprisingly enough, and I hope Councillor Deitch is not listening to this, is on social media. A lot of people don't like to use it, and they look forward to seeing, some of us are still old-fashioned. We like to see a paper. We like to have a paper in our hands and we read it, and it gets put down and picked up again. And then it lines the budgie cage. It is multifunctional, multi-purpose. Yeah, I think, quite frankly, there are other things we could be spending our money on than something like that, with all due respect. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I certainly agree that the fact that it's for people who are not on social media, and there's an awful lot of elderly people in the community that really look forward to that magazine and have given me some really positive feedback about it. And one of the points that was raised about the essential things that are so important to certain members of the community about the bin picking up, also the Christmas tree recycling. There's so much information there that I think it's unfair to just go to one particular group of the community and do everything on social media. You have to go to the whole community, and the only way you can do that is by something through the letterbox. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Right. Only other comment I have for Councillor Dugan is excellent report from Grant Thornton. I congratulate the team for being there. And it's just that we had to make sure after the pandemic, we are still going to be there. Moving on. Oh, jolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jolly stuff. This is item 5 to do with finance. What does... Where is Councillor David Lewis? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I too am a bit conscious of the time, but if there's anybody watching who hasn't got access to the agenda, I thought I'd better do a quick run over the key points here. So obviously most people are going to be interested in COVID, which has been a key priority for this council. To that end, we did create a COVID-19 hub, and we've been working with the voluntary sector, and we created a local hardship fund. It is going to have huge financial implications, which is going to be dealt with at a later agenda item. But in summary, 4 tranches of funding from the government have arrived and have been outlined in paragraph 2.18. And the government issued a further grant on the 10th of July of 63 million, of which we received £41,000. Despite that, the expected shortfall is around about 1.4 million, which is shown in the table in paragraph 2.6. Looking forward, with regards to Square, there has been a national fall in retail markets, but that would only have an effect on our finances should we elect to sell those assets. An income is being maintained to cover the loans taken out for the purchase of the assets and help preserve our services. As you're aware, a new budget is currently being created. We'll begin the rollout of zero-based budgeting, and the details of that are in paragraph 2.26. And the details of how we will achieve a balanced budget are detailed in paragraph 2.27. Treasury and investment will be dealt with at a later agenda item, so I'll skip over that. Revenues and benefits, the team there have been involved in the welfare effort at the council, but despite that, the half-year point, council tax collection is at 66.63% and business rate collection is at 61.73%. The team has paid out 15.2 million in grants to the small business, retail, leisure and hospitality area, and awarded 16 million in relief to the same sector and 282,000 to early year providers. It's also worth noting there's been a 298% increase in applications for council tax support. Procurement is detailed in part 4 of the report. A table of procurements greater than 50k is shown in the table in paragraph 4.5, along with significant procurements below that threshold. And the committee is asked to note this report. Before I go to questions, I just want to thank all the teams, well, in the council, but particularly falling under my portfolio, for all their hard work during the COVID crisis to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to item 2.16, economic growth, interested to see there the forecast for the Bank of England. Also interested to see their comments about forecasting that the economy will now take until Q1 2022 to reach its pre-pandemic level. It appears that everything is related to COVID-19. I'm sure that the potential impact of COVID-19 on the economy will be very much affected by the effectiveness or otherwise of the Oxford vaccine. We may well see the impact substantially reduced if that is very successful in reducing the occurrence of this virus in the nation. But I would have thought that a far bigger impact on Britain's economic recovery is going to be Brexit, and there's no vaccine for that. Is there something that reflects the impact of Brexit over and above these figures, or are these figures supposed to incorporate an anticipation of how Brexit will affect the economy?
Yeah, thank you. Brexit is mentioned in the report, and I'm trying to find it. Of course, they do have an excellent negotiating team, so I think we'll get a good Brexit deal. But, I don't know if Mr. Hone has anything to add.
If you want any help from the officer, please reach out. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd like to ask if Mr. Hone has any thoughts on Brexit.
No, through you, Chairman. Thank you to Councillor Lewis. All I would say is that those obviously are the figures from the bank, that they didn't specifically make a distinction between Brexit and COVID. So I think their forecast, I'll just have to just bear with me 1 second while I just remind myself. I think that comment is inclusive of both. Is their overall view. This is at 2.16, isn't it? Yeah, I think that is, although it's talking about it will get back to its pre-pandemic level, I think that's taking into account all of the headwinds that the economy is facing at the moment, and that would include any challenges from Brexit as much as any challenges from COVID.
Can I ask a question related to the same thing? I mean, if you had watched today's spending review, the forecast has substantially changed, and it is going to change. So they are only putting out spending review for 1 year. So my question to Councillor Lewis, if he has answer, if not, I'll extend it to the officers concerned. Are we taking all this into account when we are budgeting? Because we have to, because it impacts on our reserves. Councillor Lewis?
Yeah, again, I'm going to have to bounce that one to Mr. Hone, I'm afraid.
Yeah, through you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I think if you look at pause for effect, as I flick up and down my papers, paragraph 2.27, we've set out there the position which we agreed with portfolio holder in terms of our approach to the 21-22 budget and achieving a balance. And as you'll see, the first one on there is a review of the council's pay budget, and certainly we heard just today from the Chancellor that other than parts of the NHS, he's proposing a national freeze on public sector pay. Obviously, that's an issue for this council because we have locally negotiated pay awards. And then if you look down that list, things about the level of council tax, and the Chancellor has confirmed that yet again, the limit of increase would be 2% without a local referendum. We look at contractually agreed increases in prices, which tend to be linked to retail price index or CPI. And again, they're impacted by what the Chancellor set out and so forth. So there are a number of factors in achieving a balanced budget, which are impacted by the announcement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer today. And ultimately, as Councillor Lewis has pointed out, with a budget gap of 1.4 million or over, we'll be looking to bridge that gap as far as possible as we possibly can. And then you'll see that the last proposal is to look to what extent we might have to make some use of our reserves in order to achieve a balanced budget for financial year 21-22. But that obviously is a matter for politicians, and we're still drafting that budget at the moment in order to present it to members this side of Christmas.
Thank you, Officer Paul. Any added questions onto the same topic, or no? Okay, I have a couple of questions here for Councillor Lewis. If not, Officer Fox can answer that. It's regarding the domestic properties. We have collected in 3.2. You say 66.63%. I want the councillors here, as much as throughout the council, to truly understand what kind of impact it's going to have, this whole pandemic and the universal credit and LCTS, all that put together. Would we end up getting anywhere near last year? I know we had a very good record for last year for collecting council taxes. Whether it's going to have a major impact on us, because it is an important part of a balanced budget. If not, we have to dip into our reserves.
Sorry, Jim, what paragraph did you say?
It's actually, sorry, 3.2, Councillor Lewis. If not, you could pass it on to Officer Fox.
3.3.
Oh, 3.2.
Oh, so beg your pardon. I've written over 3.3. My apologies. 3.3.
Okay, well, yeah. If Mr. Fox is able because that's more predictive than is. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Yes, Chairman. At the moment, the predicted outturn will be around 99%. I think we collected 99.4 last year or 99.1, but the way it is going at the moment, it will be around the 99%. We've allowed a 1.5% margin when we set the tax base. So the tax base income was based on 98.5%. So we will exceed 98.5. And the other issue is obviously the cost of the local council tax support scheme falls upon the council tax payer. We budgeted for about 3.1 million, and even with the increase, we are not going to exceed that expenditure at the moment.
Thank you. Any other questions on this section? Nope. Only one other comment I have for not for you, Councillor Lewis, maybe it's for you as much as for the officer, finance officers, one officer, is that it's the variances which analysis which you have given, which in verbiage, it would be better for the other councillors to see a tabulated format. It'll be easier for them to understand the variances, where every department have got more than one item. It would be easier, and the questions can be asked of you sensibly. Councillor Wren.
Yeah, I just feel like this. It doesn't feel like we're preparing properly. I mean, the whole statement that we had today didn't even mention Brexit. We're 37 days away from potentially coming off a no-deal exit. And, you know, I was just reading the stats right in front of me. The economy is set to contract by 11.3%. That's the largest fall in 300 years. It just feels like that we're kind of holding off or not really preparing as much as we should be. I mean, the 1.5% for council tax, you know, leverage, that could be way more. I mean, the fact that we just seen the report that says 11,000 jobs lost, and we don't know how many more come next year. And a lot of our people that work here, we have are working in retail space, which we know is one of the industries suffering the most. I'm just saying this out loud, but it just feels very concerning that we're not properly, whether it be the council or the government more than anything, is not properly prepared for this whole situation that they have ahead, or at least got the blinkers on and not really accepting the whole situation. I don't know if you want to comment on that. You don't have to, but I just feel like we're kind of slowly but surely ticking down the time with Brexit and everything else, and not really paying attention to the significant damages that are coming ahead.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wren. I'll pass it to Councillor Lewis. If he wants, he can pass to Officer Horn, who is in charge of preparing alongside the exec the budget. It just that, just for clarification, it's not 11,000. It was an original error by ONS. It has been rectified since to 4,000, but 4,000 is also a huge number, admittedly. It's not 11,000, just for clarity. Councillor Lewis, do you want to pass it on to Officer Horn?
Yes, well, it's going to be part of the budgeting, so I assume it will be discussed at some point. I'll pass over to Mr. Horn. But,
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and through Chairman. Yeah, I think in terms of preparation for Brexit, obviously there's been a long lead time to it, and although the actual details of the deal that we reached at national government is still up for grabs, even as the deadline approaches. I mean, so in terms of preparation for Surrey Heath Borough Council, then the council has been working on this for several years. So in terms of our own preparedness for the impact of Brexit, we are as prepared as we can be. Obviously, these things get conflated. We've talked already about the economic downturn, which is impacting in Surrey Heath just as it is right across the country, affected by COVID pandemic and the downturn there, and also then the uncertainties over what the exit from the EU is exactly going to look like and what its impact will be on local businesses. So we just have to be prepared for that, and to recognise that despite all the preparations that the council has made over several years in its economic development department, there may be certain things that we'll just have to deal with as and when they arise. So we have a certain resilience and a certain degree of flexibility within our spending plans to make sure that we can respond to those as and when they arise. So I can't be more specific than that, because until these things arise, given that they're to some extent unknown, we'll confidently deal with them as and when they do arise. So I think I can't really add any more than that at the moment. Thank you.
Any questions? If not, I want to make a start. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just on this comment about Brexit, I have to say I agree with some of the comments that have been made there. I mean, and I have to disagree with Councillor Lewis. I don't think we've had a good negotiating team. I think we've heard a lot of them ready deals and all manner of things, and we still don't have one. But I appreciate that's a political point, not one for officers. But the question I do want to ask is in relation to 3.4, which we've heard about the council tax levels that have come in. And I note that we did not issue any statutory reminders for non-payment. And yet, despite that, and using a number of soft reminders, we have still received a very high level of council tax, to which I do applaud officers for doing so. But it does seem to reiterate something which I have raised on 2 separate occasions in the past, which is, why do we use bailiffs? Because it seems to me, and I know there's been some support, and I think we need to relook at this, particularly over the next year. Because if we are able to get this money, or very large amounts of it, particularly in households which are really suffering, and that's going to be particularly the case over the next year, then I'm personally concerned about using bailiffs for individual debtors, not for commercial. I think that's a separate matter entirely, but particularly in this area of austerity. I am uncomfortable about the concept of it. I know we use so-called friendly bailiffs, but nonetheless, I think we need to think very carefully as councillors whether we wish to be comfortable with that going forward. And I know a number of councillors are not very comfortable, and I think we need to perhaps consider that going forward as to whether that's something that we wish to look at as a policy, in the same way that Hammersmith and Fulham have already taken that decision. I think other councils are going to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. I see that the leader is here today, so maybe if just to indulge the rest of the councillors, if leader would like to reply to that, if you don't mind, Alan.
I'd be happy to, Councillor Marvagnam. First of all, the same as you, Councillor Bates, I would draw a distinction between bailiffs going into businesses. That's part of the rough and tumble of business and holding on to cash flow, etc. And there's decisions being made there, with bailiffs going into individual houses. Then, of course, as I often say, there's a balance to be struck between, I think it's a natural instinct, and I think I have it the same as you, that we don't want to put anyone in a position where they're even worse than their current circumstances are. The balance of that, of course, is that they are benefiting from the services that everyone else is paying for, and we have to make sure that we use every tool that we can to make sure that we are, on behalf of the other taxpayers, getting that. The current balance, as you say, is, and I haven't heard that term before, and I'm happy to talk to Councillor Lewis about this in future, but I haven't heard the term that we use, friendly bailiffs, almost a juxtaposition. But I'd be more than happy to look at that policy and make sure that we are using it ideally 0 times, but certainly the minimum number of times that we possibly can.
Thank you for that, Councillor McLafferty. I must add something to this conversation, because Councillor McLafferty and I have had conversations on the same subject on and off for the year, near enough a year now. I'm also of the same mind as Councillor Bates and Councillor McLafferty with regard to sending bailiffs in to collect rates. I think we have to be sensitive, because these are the people who genuinely cannot afford to pay. I'm glad Councillor Lewis and Councillor McLafferty can get together with the officers and try and find a sensible way forward on this. Thank you. Any other questions? Good. It's 8:05, so let's take us. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a very quick question. It's item 4.5. Actually, there appear to be two for item 4.5s. This is the one on page 26. Mentions the acquisition by Surrey Heath of Express Election Software. Can someone quickly tell me what is that?
Councillor Lewis.
Oh, Mr. Payne.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Chairman. That's the
please
software
do.
that's the software that we use for the administering the electoral registration and elections generally.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, great. It's 6:08 now. Let's shall we take a break for 10 minutes and come back? Yep, thank you. Is everyone in? Are the committee members in? I presume so. Yeah, I think we are all in. Great. Are we ready to roll? Thumbs up will be great. Thank you. Councillor Lewis, you are back again. Treasury management.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this report is basically the half-year report to show that we are complying with the Treasury management indicators. Council, to this end, follows the advice of our Treasury advisors, Arling Close, and their review is attached at Annex D to this report. As far as borrowing is concerned, on the 31st of March, our capital financing requirement was determined to be £196 million, a figure that we mustn't exceed. And indeed, on the 30th of September, our total borrowing was £170 million. Our borrowing position is detailed in the table at paragraph 4.1. As currently short-term borrowing has lower rates than long-term borrowing, it is more cost-effective for us to borrow on short-term loans. However, to reduce risk, the Council has entered into £50 million forward starting loans, with half starting this financial year and the second half in the next financial year. Other borrowing options available have been discussed on paragraphs 4.5 to 410. And as far as investment is concerned, in the early part of the year, we received £23 million worth of government funding, which was temporarily invested with the Debt Management Office. As of the 30th of September, £15 million has been dispersed. Of the council-held funds, the average balance has been £20 million. Our half-year investment position is shown in the table at paragraph 4.13. Of note is paragraph 4.15, where deposit rates for the debt management account deposit facility fell below 0%. Hence the recommendation in paragraph 4.18. And in fact, I should have mentioned earlier, there is a slight correction. In paragraph 4.18, the word allow should have been changed to recommend, for everyone's note. Council investments at the 30th of September are listed at Annex A. The estimated return on investments at the end of the year is expected to be a shortfall of £28,000 against the budget. This is due to low interest rates as outlined again in Annex D to this report. Compliance with Treasury management indicators has been detailed in Annexes B and C, and the committee is asked to note and comment on the report. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any questions on this one? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to the annex and specifically to item SHBC3, land east of Knoll Road, on hold. Can you tell me why it's on hold?
Sorry. You have confused me. Where are you, Councillor Tapper?
In the annex, page 2 of the annex. It's the ones which are in landscape mode rather than.
Yeah, I think that's the mid-year performance report. I think which is a later item in the agenda.
Is it not included in this one?
No, this is for item number 6. We are on item number 6 here. That's coming on later on, Graham. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if there's none, because it is a complicated subject, I fully accept that and then give everyone the credit for not asking the question and perhaps looking a bit foolish. So I've had the pleasure of talking to our advisors recently, and there's a certain amount of rationale as to what they are doing. But my big question here for the exec is to actually consider the risk element on it, because we are actually going into economic circumstances which are going to be unparalleled anywhere else, with negative interest rates, so on and so forth. We don't know when we would get out of negative. Actually, we currently near enough zero, but the market rates are negative currently. Do we want to still play the market? It's an operative word, but that's what people would say. Do we still want to play the market? Or as a council, say, let's not play it. Let's go long term. Okay, we are reliant. I'm not giving a lecture. I'm making a statement here. We are reliant on external advice. It is something the exec seriously need to step back and look at it. Hence, my point earlier on, and Councillor Wren's point earlier on, economic circumstances over the next year, 2 years are going to be entirely different to even I would have seen in my 35 years career in business. I'm sure Councillor McLafty wouldn't have seen it either. It's going to be an entirely different ballgame. So do we protect the council against such risks is my point. Councillor McLafty?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer that briefly, if I may, if that's okay with Councillor Lewis. You're right. I think I would go along with that. I think we're going to see as we were just discussing, we're going to see a recession and challenges that we've never seen before. I certainly haven't in my 30 years in business. This is going to be a biggie. But you're absolutely right. We do take advice. We don't just take advice from one organization. We take it across the board. We have our own professionals like Mr. Hone who are trained in this, but I definitely take on board that we have to be, I think I'll put it down as extra vigilant. Our strategy so far of going with the short-term loans, always ensuring we have the ability to jump to long-term if we need to, has saved us, I think I'm right, in something in the order of £1 million in interest payments, which of course would have been coming from taxpayers' money. So I think we're currently on the right track, but I definitely take on board your suggestion that we need to be extra vigilant and just trying to look over the horizon and see what's coming and make sure that we're well placed to do that.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Wren.
Just a question about the borrowing capacity. We seem to be racing or hurtling towards it pretty quickly. So we've borrowed 170 million so far, and our limit is 230 million. And obviously the next couple of years and next half decade at least are very uncertain times. I'm just wondering if that's something that is going to be reviewed or something that we're concerned we're going to be getting to far too quickly. I'm just wondering what thoughts there are on the debt level as it is at the moment.
Councillor Lewis, if you want to pass it on, I don't mind.
No. Yeah, if you look at paragraph 4.1 of the table, the movement there, the borrowing has gone up 10 million, but that's because of the leisure centre. So in fact, our borrowing has remained pretty good. I don't know if Mr. Hone wants to add anything to that.
Well, thank you, Councillor Lewis. I mean, just very quickly, just an observation. The reason for keeping our borrowing at short term is because PWLB rates have been quite high for longer term borrowing. Chancellor today has removed, with effect immediately, has reduced PWLB lending rates by 1% right across the board. So that in terms of reviewing the maturity dates of our borrowing portfolio, obviously that's something we would look at, and it makes longer term borrowing more attractive than it has been for quite a while. In terms of our overall borrowing, we cannot go beyond that boundary of 190 million. We simply cannot do that. We're constrained in that way, and so therefore obviously we have to look at borrowing that's coming up to repayment, whether we want to refinance those loans or whether we pay them off and so forth, but we'll always be working within that envelope of 190 million is the max. So that will vary, and it may go up slightly in future years as our finance base expands, and therefore our ability to service loans of 190, 200 million and beyond. But absolutely, we wouldn't be taking on more borrowing than we could afford to repay, and actually we are actually constrained from doing so.
Thank you for that, Officer Mr. Hone. Actually, you beat me to something which I was holding back after all the questions, just in case it didn't come up. If there are no more questions, I've got one other point to make before we move on from this subject. Any other questions? Clearly not. Okay. On 4.5 of the paper, we actually talk about the public works loan board lending. This, I'm sure Officer Horn hasn't seen it. Otherwise, I would urge him to quickly go and have a look at it, because all the criteria, which there was consultation going regarding the PWLB loans, it's actually been announced today by the Chancellor. So the criteria of borrowing is significantly changed. That's part of the reason I was suggesting the exec takes all that into account when we extend our loans and look at our entire loan portfolio alongside our property portfolio, asset portfolio. It may or may not have an impact. It's very important to read that new legislation or paper that has come out alongside the spending review today. It's an important paper. Please review. I'm happy to send links on to Councillor McLafty and to Officer Horn if required. Thank you. And moving on, speaking about risk. Okay, item number 7 now. Jolly. Councillor Lewis again. You're on shore today, Councillor Lewis.
It's the Councillor Lewis show. This is basically a snapshot of the council finances of the 30th of September 2020. It has been a challenging and unprecedented year so far, making it difficult to draw any conclusions as to the outturn at the end of the year, except to predict at this stage an overall overspend for the year. The table at paragraph 2.1, which you saw earlier in agenda item 5, is this time qualified with data outlined in Appendix A to this report. Predicts an overspend at the end of the year of 1.4 million. Capital budget, the changes to capital budget are detailed in paragraphs 2.2 to 2.6, and treasury investments we've just dealt with in the last agenda item. Debtors, section 3 gives details of our sundry and housing benefit debts. And the Performance of Finance Scrutiny Committee is advised to note this report and the proposed additions and amendments to the 2020-21 capital programme. Thank you.
Questions on this? Okay, let me kick off with a simple question. Most likely it has to be, it could be Councillor Horn answering this. On the investment development, the negative figure of 1.5 million, I presume bulk of it is. This is the reason I said the tabular format will be useful, because it's an adverse income or minus income for other people. It's an adverse income of 1.5 million. I presume it's all to do with the MAL income, because from the schedule you gave us earlier on, I think the industrial properties are doing well. Question: what's the collection rate like on the retail units and the MAL collection? Councillor Lewis?
That is a very good question. Mr. Hone,
you could pass it on to Officer Horn if you wish. If you don't, I don't mind.
But thank you, Councillor Lewis, and through you, Chairman. Yeah, I think that sort of sums it up. Compared to our the council's budget set in February, in anticipated rent income from all our property portfolio, that breaks down into 3 areas, and you've mentioned that already, Chairman. That we hold some industrial units. They, under the economic downturn, have held up pretty well, actually. And although we've had to make some arrangements with tenants to delay their payments of rent, we are actually writing off very, very little. So our rental stream income from industrial estate is pretty much where we want it to be. Office units actually make up a very small part of our overall portfolio, and they are doing all right as well. But as you say, it's the retail that's really taken a pounding, and particularly, as you say, the Camberley Town Centre. Now, actually, I'm not able to give you the actual collection rate. I haven't got it to hand, but I could certainly write to committee and confirm what it is. But we are anticipating a shortfall against budgeted income of £1.5 million. That is what that is as a percentage. I'm sorry, I just don't have it here, but I can certainly write to the committee on that and confirm what that percent as a percentage of total budget is. I just don't have it here.
Thank you. If there are any supplement questions, sorry, Councillor Bates.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just on that last point, obviously there is a working group, I believe, that is looking into that particular purchase. And this is actually one for you, actually, Chairman, just to perhaps consider and think about, but just to particularly look at what information, if any, was available to councillors specifically on the reassurances around rents, because that is something which you've obviously looked into or have raised concern about, and clearly we've now heard the result of it. So I'm sure as part of your working group's consideration, as I've said, I'm not a member of that group for reasons which I've privately explained, but that may be something that you wish to look into in more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. It is under consideration. I've requested for more details from Officer Horn on the rental income, not only with regarding retail of all, we are looking at all properties. So we should be able to report back to the committee as much as to the full council. Thank you. Again, sticking to the same point, but a bigger picture. Sorry, are there any more questions before I? No. Okay. Sticking to the bigger picture, my real concern, again, going back to the council finances, because again, this is a for the moment it's a known fact, but what do we know what's going to happen over the next year, 2 years with regarding, it doesn't matter whether it's retail or industrial. Are we actually going to make enough provisions in the budgets going forward and make sure that we have got adequate funds available to the council to provide the services we are going to be providing? It's something for the exec to take on board. As a chair of PNF, I can only say that over and over again. Yes, Councillor McClafferty.
So, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a perfectly valid question. As Councillor Lewis and Mr. Hone said, the officers are currently working through the first draft of the budget. The executive have given the steer, as you would expect, and that's been outlined in a previous paper. The number one item that we gave the officers was we do not want to cut any services. And I think that has pretty much universal support throughout the chamber. I'm not speaking for any other group, but that's what I believe. So they're coming back to us with what they can do in terms of savings and what they can do in terms of protecting services. The intention then, Mr. Chairman, is that once we have that first draft, then we will be discussing that with not only the executive, but also the group leaders. And we'll want input from, again, across the chamber to make sure that we are identifying any areas of concern, including what we're allocating for safety, and make sure that we try and come up with the most robust budget that we can.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. I made you the chair for their minute, Alan. Any other questions on agenda item 7? Very clearly not. Okay, moving on. Well, again, I actually make an appeal to the officers, because I've had 3 versions of that piece of paper. I would appreciate if we can try and give the final papers to all of us in one go. I know it's, yeah, chairman and the vice chair meeting is always a week ahead. Appreciate that. In between, numbers change, etc., etc. A little bit more, and the heads of execs as well. I mean, if you can make sure that the confusion. I had to go through, there's a personal complaint. I had to go through about 3 different sets of papers today to consolidate this meeting. Off we go. Leader, it's your show now. Item number 8, which is to do with half-year performance report.
Thank you, Mr. Sashi. I have to say that I wasn't actually called upon it to present this paper at the meeting, but I'm happy to do so. Okay.
It's headed portfolio leader, so I presume it's you, or it could be any of your exec. I don't mind. Sorry, Richard Payne. Sorry.
I was going to say I think I'm here to support the officers rather than the other way around this time.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, can I just to clarify, normally the update reports from the portfolio holders of what's presented by both Councillor Dugan and Councillor Lewis previously. A report such as this is normally presented by the officers on this occasion.
This then, Richard.
I think Mrs. Livingston probably and Mrs. Bainbridge are here to do this one, supported by executive heads if there's questions.
Please go for it. You're on show now. You're frozen. Richard, can you sort of ping Louise to actually reboot? Thank you.
I think she probably is, Chairman.
I'll wait for a minute also. I'm sure Mr. Livingston will join us. And looks like we got problems. Councillor Galliford has been crashed out as well. So if Kate can have a look out for Councillor Galliford to come back, when she comes back, to let her in.
I'm keeping my eye on the waiting room.
Chairman, if Mrs. Livingston doesn't come back, there are a number of executive heads here, and we are supported by Sarah Bainbridge, who's helped pull this report together. So if you wanted one of us to
go for it. Let's keep moving. Let's keep moving because
I think Sarah Bainbridge said she could give you an update because she's helped coordinate this with all of the executive heads.
Perfect. Sarah, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is the mid-year report of the annual plan. The annual plan was agreed back in March, obviously just before the COVID crisis. And what we've done is give a mid-year report in terms of where we are with all of the key projects across the different areas of the council in terms of our current status and what we're projecting that status to be at the end of the year. And then again, with all of the council's success measures, how we're doing against those targets. I don't think Louise was proposing to kind of go through page by page. So I suppose it's just if there's any questions or comments, and then this report is going to be reported to the next meeting of the executive together with any comments from this committee. And either I or any of my exec head colleagues, I'm sure, will be able to assist with any of the answers.
Questions? Councillor Bates, then Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions on this. The first is under BUS4, which is the physical activity strategy, where I know.
Give the page number, please.
I'm looking at page 34. So in the report, which is BUS4, the physical activity strategy, which I note has been delayed. But the point there is that it does look as if Old Dean is the most inactive ward, which did slightly surprise me, bearing in mind the number of sports clubs that actually operate from there. And so I suppose my question is just to make sure that when that strategy does get to be rewritten over the winter, that the Old Dean councillors are involved in that. In discussion, because as I said, both of us are actually involved in a number of the different activities and would, I'm sure, want to be involved in that discussion. And the second question, the second point, is in regard to the next page, page 35, COM4, improvements to flats recycling. Now, I live in a flat, and I know what the problems are with the flats recycling. And in fact, where I live is one of the worst offenders, I suspect. And the problem is twofold. One is that there are residents who don't understand what the differences of bins are, because there may be residents with special needs or language issues. And that's one issue. And the second is regard to locked doors for bin sheds. I don't want to have a lengthy discussion about it, but basically other people can access it, and it's nothing to do with the residents at all, who then take the opportunity of dumping their own items in there. So those are really the two main reasons, and that's always been the reasons, as far as I can tell, in terms of flats recycling. And Old Dean is, again, the worst area for this. So I would hope that when we do have that discussion, that again we can use the knowledge and of councillors where these are particular issues in resolving these important problems.
Have we noted that for it to be passed on to the relevant officers and exec, please? Any other points? Any other questions? Councillor Tapper, then Councillor McLafferty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies for the intervention before. I had not noticed that we jumped from the main agenda to the supplementary papers. Yes, returning to my question before on SHBC3, land east of Knoll Road, why is this on hold?
Which page number is it, please? It's a big report. If you give the page number, it will help us.
32.
Got it. Carry on, Greg.
Yeah, there's one other question as well on BUS2, the grounds maintenance, the change of contracts between Sodexo and Glendale. We have an outbreak of Japanese knotweed on Heatherside that Surrey County Council accepted a responsibility for. They've now reneged on that, declared it weed control, and therefore handed it back to the borough. Is this something that the borough accepts, this hand back of responsibility from Surrey County Council? And if so, when can we expect Glendale to deal with this? The longer this is left, the more it will grow and spread, and the harder it will be to eradicate.
Just to reiterate your previous question, if I got it right, you actually said, why is it on hold regarding land east of Knoll Road? Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor McLaughlin, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. That's actually why I had my hand up. It was just to come in on Councillor Tapper's original premature question. Land east of Knoll Road has been an element of the development programme for Camberley Town Centre for many, many years. A huge amount of work has gone into it, and it has a number of substantial roadblocks. The library is in there, which is owned by county. County also owns some property in a school that's currently going through a change of use behind the Knoll Road car park. The theatre is in there, and of course the office building that we would normally be in for this meeting. In my discussions with the property team, it was clear that they had a number of what will definitely be far more productive projects in terms of the town centre London roadblock, but we only have a certain amount of resource. And my view was very much, as I expressed to Mr. Passion, that as far as I was concerned, given the size of the roadblocks and the potential return on what was called the Lecker project, I think that that project should be put on hold until we have the resource and things have changed to make it far more productive. So Mr. Passion has, I think, taken that view. Sorry, for some reason my watch is talking to me, which isn't bad, it's a timeout. So I would say, so Mr. Passion has agreed and he's put that project on hold while we focus our resources on much more productive projects. As far as the business one on the change of use and the knotweed, I think I'll leave someone else to answer that. Thank you.
Anyone would like to answer Councillor Tapper's creepers? Councillor, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just quickly. Yeah, we're aware of that issue, Councillor Tapper, in terms of the county trying to hand back that responsibility. As you know from other issues on Heather's side that I've had to deal with recently, we are quite robust in our response to that request. Obviously, we don't want that to be to the detriment of the residents. So I will pick that up with the team tomorrow, and we will focus on that and see what we can do in terms of resolution.
Thank you. Any other points on this very, very long report? I'm surprised it's only 2. Then I was thinking we got to go till 10 o'clock on this report alone. Okay, I got one for Mr. Harrison. My wife and I like to go out walking during lockdown. There are bins down Churchill, all the way into town, full of dogs' doodas in bags. It has not been collected for some time. It's actually full. I don't know it's been done now, but it's important that we, even during lockdown, we get someone to go and collect it. But coming to town centre, all the bins are clean. So I'm very surprised it's not been done. And this is something for the officers to take away. Not you physically, but someone for you guys to organize. No pun intended.
Did you want me to respond to that, Councillor Mavaganam?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that issue particularly there. Obviously, the dog bins are regularly emptied by our contractors.
These are regular bins. These are regular bins where people are actually putting dog.
And you can put. It is allowed to put dog waste into regular bins as well, and the waste bins are emptied regularly. But obviously, we've seen, and I think we've had this discussion before, during lockdown, there's been a much heavier use of our local amenities with people working from home, people being furloughed, etc., young people not going to college and school, and that's had a heavier impact on our resources. We're hoping now with the weather changing that will calm down a little bit, but that particular area, I'll just double check that there hasn't been a problem there that I'm just not aware of, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, actually, I'd just like to extend thanks, because I think that the amount that everybody has been using our green spaces, I've never seen as many people walking, myself included, being an absolute couch potato. I'm out and I'm walking every day. And whereas the Sangs areas never used to overflow, they are completely overflowing on a Sunday morning, and that's before anybody's been walking on a Sunday. But I think that on the whole, the response every time I've reported something has been very swift. So I'd like to say thank you, because I know that the guys are working really hard, and it's a job that we planned to do so many times, given a sort of a type of response. So it's a thank you for me for the response that I get every time I report one of those bins. So thanks, keep it up.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I echo what Councillor Wheeler said. You guys do work hard. Is there anything, Sarah? Is there anything that's outstanding? So that's sort of, there's major points which are delayed for any particular reason which you want to bring to our attention?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, a number of the items, as you might expect, are delayed or have missed target due to COVID, either because of these sort of impacts in general, or in a few occasions due to sort of redeployment of resources to support the welfare response. But a number of those are due to kind of be back on track towards the end of the year. I think Louise is back on the call. I don't know if there's anything particularly that Louise wanted to add to that.
No, Sarah, you did a great job. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about dropping out earlier.
Do you want to add anything at all, Louise, to the conversation? Okay, only comment I have as Chair is that, can you keep the PNF committee informed of the, I'm sure you are going to keep us informed, particularly on the delayed items due to COVID, to the pandemic itself, that due to lack of staff or services that's important for us to understand where we are. Thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem, Chair.
Moving on to item number 9, which is infrastructure funding statement. Right, I'm sure it's a lot of interest for people. This is still money. Right, Councillor Lewis, you're back again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, always thrilled to be called back for an encore. Right, yeah, as you said, this is the infrastructure funding statement for 2019-2020. It's a report that's required to be published online to show the Council's infrastructure projects that are to be partly or wholly funded from SIL. A summary of the funding raised through SIL is shown at paragraph 1.3, and the report is attached as agenda item. Appendix 2 of the report shows the SIL funds that are available. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. One piece of information that appears to be missing from this report, I'd like very much a feedback on, is the number of SIL applications that have been made but have not yet been considered or have a decision entered on them, and the potential total amount of money involved in those applications. Would it be possible to get those figures so that we know what our potential commitment might be if all of those applications, which still have to be decided, were approved? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we're actually obliged to say how many applications there are. I don't know if Mrs. Rickard can confirm that.
Rickard, would you like to add something to that?
Thank you, Chairman. The applications are in this financial year, so obviously we're not reporting on them in this report, but currently have 4 outstanding. We have, some of them aren't fully costed, so I can't actually tell you what the total value is, but we will, the bid round for the ward funding opens next month, and we will be looking at all of those. So you will get a report before the end of the financial year for all of those bids. And the executive can decide what it wants to do with them at that point.
Maybe Councillor Lewis or Councillor McCluskey can actually update or give the proposal that's going through exec on SIL money, maybe just to clarify all the scenarios, outstanding stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Are you asking what are the changes that have been proposed and agreed for the SIL?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So traditionally, up until very recently, SIL money, as you know, is being paid by the developers to go into infrastructure. It has been primarily 100% ward councillor led. Some ward councillors have been very, very good and have got their hands on that money and made sure that projects have gone through and are going through now. But the vast majority of ward councillors actually find that they have 2 problems. One is it's very difficult to access within the rules. And secondly, often what happens is if you take, for instance, town, which gets, let's face it, hundreds and hundreds of flats, and therefore has large amounts of SIL money. And what is the infrastructure that's required within the small area of the town? And then you take, and I'll mention Old Dean, which is an obvious one, which has a pretty large requirement and could have a good appetite for infrastructure, which would help that ward and that community. But actually gets relatively small amounts of development, and so therefore has small amounts of SIL. So the executive has discussed this with the officers and have changed it to just brought in a number of amended rules. First and foremost, if ward councillors who have taken the development, or the wards that have taken the development, they have first call on the amount of money that's SIL in their ward. And if they can use it, then that's fine. If not, then the money can now be used across the borough. And so, for instance, in town, then Old Dean could actually access that money. And then the other thing is that it's going to be community-led, so that community groups can work with the council to direct those projects towards what can be done for that community. So it's a different approach. It's the same money. It's actually used for the same projects, same ideas, but it's actually going to be used much more easily across the borough for the benefit of more people.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to flag up, Parkside have been very efficient in the use of our SIL monies, in that we've contributed to additional equipment in play areas and the BAS signs on the Portsmouth Road, which residents have been very grateful for. We are working, or I'm in this instance working with Councillor Deach to put some money towards the further works on the Ravenscote crossing. Once we can get officer consent and approval to do that, along with some further traffic calming measures in other roads. But the main thrust and where we would be looking to spend our SIL money is on the Ravenscote crossing, which I managed to get started but nearly 2 years ago now, and is very much a priority of mine to meet the aspirations of parents. If anybody's got any plans and aspirations for SIL money, please don't try and take it all, because I want to use some of ours and Paul's for the crossing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins, for the advertisement. Anyone else?
Like nobody else has been advertising and flogging their own dead horses, so I thought I would have a go there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Alloway.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do welcome the rearrangement of how these funds are distributed, because you can get areas that, like my own, as well publicised, takes a huge amount of development and some almost 1,000 people increase. And what money comes from the 15% to parish will not apply and satisfy all the infrastructure requirements that is required to support all these new developments. In fact, I'd just like to clarify that these projects, are they purely community driven, or if in the ward councillors or whatever identify areas that have been communicated by members of the public are required, can they be considered, or is it purely from community groups and separate projects?
Councillor McLufty.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Alloway, no, it doesn't really matter how the project starts. What I'm looking for is, I'm a firm believer that nobody can do anything on their own. Everybody has to work together, right? And the council shouldn't be just telling the residents what they need, right? And we've got a role to play, but so does the residents in the community. So what I would suggest is, if there's a project comes to a local ward councillor and he or she wants to champion it, then that's ideal. But it's definitely going to be that the projects that are going to get the money are going to be where the community is involved and the ward councillor is endorsing that project. I'd also just caution that the parish councils, in the fact that they get their 15%, are extremely limited in what else they can get from this actual project. But I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that offline.
Thank you, Councillor McLufty. Any more questions on this particular item? No. Right. Oh, rapidly, 9 o'clock. So we shall not take a break at 9. We shall try and finish this in about, hopefully within the next 10 minutes. If there's nothing else on item 9, it's property investment task and finish group. It's effectively a verbal report from me. Sorry, did you want to say something, Mr. Payne? Okay. Task and finish group has been working, we have been meeting almost every week now. and it is slowly but steadily coming together. I wouldn't say it's coming to an end yet, but it's coming together in a very systematic way. We hope, unfortunately, the date the group had given, which is the 25th of November, we will not be meeting that because it's just slipped beyond our control, really, to be fair. So most likely it'll come to the PNF in January, thereafter to the full council at the next to the next council, hopefully to the full council. The report will come in January council. I'll have to look at the dates, how we run this, so that we can try and have a discussion at the full council in January of next year. I have nothing more to add to that, other than to say it's definitely coming together. We have had a few delays, put it that way, to one or two misunderstanding of issues, but it's all been sorted out. Right. Any more questions on this? If not, no. Okay, great. Work program, the last item. There is a work program attached. I hope everyone's looked at it. That could, in January, work program could change depending on the size of the report we have from the property investment working group. So I would actually keep everyone posted. The idea is to try and cover the entire council within this council year by the PNF. So if need be, we would actually bring in an additional meeting somewhere along the line, try to fit everything into one whole year. If nothing else is on, everyone's happy with the work program. Do you want to add anything, gentlemen or ladies? No? Perfect. Excellent news. And thank you for attending, and good night.